The Vrexian warships appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning. 3 massive vessels, each one the size of a small city, hung in orbit like dark clouds. They did not hide. They did not negotiate. They simply broadcast their message in every language on Earth. Surrender now. You have 48 hours. Commander Zixathera stood on the bridge of his flagship looking down at the blue planet below. He had conquered 12 worlds in his military career. This would be his 13th. The intelligence reports made it clear this would be easy. Too easy, perhaps. The creatures down there called themselves humans. They were small, standing only about 2 meters tall at most. They had soft skin with no natural armor, no claws, no poison, no enhanced strength. Their bones broke easily. Their flesh tore with minimal force. By every physical measure, they were weak. What do we know about their military capability? Zixathera asked his second officer. Primitive nuclear weapons, Commander. Chemical rockets. Basic aircraft. Nothing that can threaten us in orbit. The officer pulled up holographic displays showing human weapons. They still fight each other regularly. Over 200 separate nations. No unified command structure. Zixathera made a gesture of satisfaction. Divided prey was easy prey. And their psychology? Emotional. Highly irrational. They form attachments to small animals and keep them in their homes. They cry at fictional stories. They show excessive care for their young and elderly, even when those individuals cannot contribute to the group. The officer paused. They are soft, Commander. In every sense. This matched what Zixathera had seen in the surveillance videos. Humans laughing at moving pictures. Humans hugging, humans playing with small furry creatures. They seemed more like pets themselves than a proper warrior species. 50,000 troops will be sufficient, Zixathera decided. Begin landing operations in 24 hours. Target their major population centers. Once we control those, the rest will surrender. On Earth, in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Lisa Matthews watched the alien ships with cold calculation. She had been waiting for this moment for 15 years. Not this exact moment, not these exact aliens, but something like it. They think we're going to just give up, said General Peter Kane, standing beside her. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady hands. They always think that. Lisa nodded. Broadcast the prepared response. Make it sound diplomatic, peaceful. We need them to think we're scared. The message went out to the Vrexian fleet. It spoke of dialogue and understanding. It mentioned international law and peaceful resolution. It was designed to sound exactly like what a frightened, primitive species would say when faced with superior technology. Zixathera received the message and dismissed it immediately. They are stalling. It does not matter. Proceed with the invasion. What Zixathera did not know was that humans had been preparing for this possibility since they first looked up at the stars. Every major nation had plans. Hidden weapons, underground shelters, and something else. Something the Vrexians would not understand until it was too late. Humans had been fighting wars for their entire existence. Not just with aliens or predators, but with each other, for thousands of years. They had developed 10,000 different ways to kill. They had studied tactics and strategy like some species studied art. War was not something humans did. It was something humans were. Activate Protocol Apex, Lisa said quietly. Across the planet, hidden facilities came online. Weapon systems that had never been tested in actual combat hummed to life. In bases from Japan to Germany, from Australia to Brazil, soldiers prepared for battle. These were not conscripts or parade troops. These were volunteers who had trained their entire adult lives for combat. In New York City, people evacuated to the underground shelters they had drilled in for years. The streets emptied. The buildings went dark. The city became a ghost town in 6 hours. Let them land, Lisa had ordered. Let them think they've already won. The first Vrexian dropships descended the next morning. They landed in 12 cities simultaneously. New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, Delhi, Cairo, Los Angeles, Tokyo, Berlin, Sydney, Mexico City, and São Paulo. 200 troops per city, plus heavy combat mechs. Captain Krelnoth led the landing in New York. His troops marched out of their ships into Central Park, expecting resistance. Expecting crowds of panicked humans, expecting something. Instead, they found silence. Sensor sweep, Krelnoth ordered. No active life signs in the immediate area, Captain. Thermal imaging shows the buildings are empty. The prey has gone underground. Krelnoth was not surprised. Prey always ran. Forward march. We secure the administrative district. They will surrender once they see our power. The Vrexian troops moved south through Manhattan. They were impressive, each one standing 4 meters tall in their combat armor. Their weapons could punch through concrete. Their mechs walked on legs thicker than tree trunks. They made it 4 blocks before the first building exploded. It was not a missile strike. It was not a bomb dropped from above. The building simply erupted from within, as if it had been packed with explosives and waiting for them. 30 Vrexian soldiers died in the initial blast. The shockwave knocked down 2 of their mechs. Before they could respond, gunfire erupted from a dozen different directions, not the crude ballistic weapons their intelligence had described. These were armor-piercing rounds fired from concealed positions. A Vrexian officer's helmet shattered. Purple blood sprayed. "Take cover!" "Return fire!" Krelnoth shouted, but there was nothing to return fire at. The enemy was invisible, hidden in buildings and sewers and underground tunnels. The Vrexians fired at shadows while the real threats repositioned and fired again. In a tunnel 3 blocks away, Marine Lieutenant Jake Patterson watched through a periscope as the aliens scrambled for cover. He was 28 years old and had been preparing for this day since he enlisted at 18. "Phase 1 complete," he said into his radio. "Moving to Phase 2. His platoon of 40 Marines moved through the subway tunnels like ghosts. They knew every passage, every access point, every hiding spot. They had trained in these tunnels for years. "Remember," Jake told his squad leaders, "these things have been fighting wars for 300 years, but they fight like they're on an open battlefield. They don't know cities. They don't know guerrilla warfare. We're going to teach them." The same scene played out in 11 other cities, Vrexian forces landing to find empty streets, then ambushes, then chaos. Buildings exploded. Snipers fired from impossible distances. Entire squads of aliens walked into kill zones and were shredded by crossfire before they understood what was happening. In Chicago, a Vrexian mech stepped on what looked like an ordinary manhole cover. The shaped charge beneath it was powerful enough to flip the 10-ton machine onto its back. Before the pilot could recover, a team of soldiers appeared from the sewers, planted more explosives, and disappeared. The mech erupted in flames. In Berlin, Vrexian troops tried to use their air support. Human anti-aircraft missiles fired from mobile launchers that moved after every shot knocked 3 alien aircraft from the sky in 20 minutes. In Tokyo, the streets themselves became weapons. Hidden charges dropped buildings across key intersections, trapping Vrexian forces in kill zones. Commander Zixthera watched the casualty reports climb with growing disbelief. In 6 hours, they had lost 800 troops. They had not secured a single objective. The humans were not surrendering. They were not even defending in a conventional sense. They were hunting. "This is impossible," his tactical officer said. "They are prey." Their psychology profiles indicated compliance, submission. Zixthera stared at the data. The humans had no unified command, yet they fought with perfect coordination. They had inferior technology, yet they were winning engagements. They looked weak and emotional, yet they fought with cold, calculated viciousness. "Request reinforcements from high command," Zixthera ordered, "and begin orbital bombardment of suspected resistance positions." But even as he gave the order, Zixthera felt something he had not experienced in 20 years of military service. He felt doubt. On Earth, in 12 cities, human soldiers retreated into their tunnels and bunkers. They had taken casualties too, but they had proven something important. "They bleed," Jake Patterson said to his exhausted platoon. "They die, and they don't know how to fight us." Above them, the Vrexian ships prepared their bombardment. Below, humanity prepared for a long war. The invasion had just begun. The Vrexian High Command was not pleased. Commander Zixthera stood before the holographic projections of the 3 supreme leaders, trying to explain how a primitive species had killed nearly 1,000 of his troops in less than a day. "You said this would take a week," Supreme Leader Vexnor stated coldly. "You said they were weak." "They are weak, my leader, physically, but their tactics are unlike anything we have encountered. They do not fight in formation. They do not hold territory. They strike and vanish, then adapt. We are sending reinforcements. 200,000 additional troops, 9 battle cruisers. Crush them." The hologram cut off. Zixthera stood in silence. 200,000 troops to pacify one primitive world. It was embarrassing. But he had no choice. The humans had to be destroyed. The reinforcements arrived within 36 hours. The Vrexian fleet now dominated Earth's orbit. They began systematic orbital bombardment of suspected military facilities. Kinetic strikes that hit with the force of small nuclear weapons. Mountains exploded. Valleys turned to glass. Lisa Matthews watched the destruction from her bunker command center. Each strike killed humans. Each explosion was someone's home, someone's city. The casualties were climbing past 100,000. They are trying to break our will, General Peter Kane said. Then they don't understand us at all, Lisa replied. Activate the air defense network and send the signal to all resistance cells. Phase 2 begins now. Across the planet, human forces had been waiting. They had taken casualties in the first attacks, learned from them, adapted. Now it was time to show the Vrexians what humanity could really do. In Nevada, Air Force Captain Greg Turner sat in the cockpit of his fighter jet. It was an old model built 30 years ago. The Vrexians probably thought it was a museum piece. They were wrong. All wings, this is lead, Greg said into his radio. Target is the Vrexian patrol ship over the Grand Canyon. Stay low, use the terrain. They won't see us coming until it's too late. 4 fighters screamed through the canyon at barely 50 feet off the ground. Their radar was switched off. They were navigating by sight alone, following the twisting canyon at speeds that would have terrified any sane pilot. Target acquired, Greg's weapons officer said. 5,000 meters, 12 o'clock high. The Vrexian patrol ship hung in the sky above the canyon, scanning for ground targets. Its sensors were designed for space combat, for tracking threats from thousands of kilometers away. It never detected the fighters until they were already launching missiles. 4 missiles, 4 different angles, all arriving within 2 seconds of each other. The Vrexian ship tried to evade, but at that range and atmosphere it had no chance. The explosions tore through its hull. The ship tumbled from the sky, trailing fire and black smoke. Break and evade, Greg shouted, diving back into the canyon as the aliens' escort ship scrambled to respond. But the human fighters were already gone, racing through the narrow canyon at speeds that made the walls blur. The air war became humanity's first major victory. Vrexian ships were faster, more powerful, better armed. But human pilots flew with a recklessness that the aliens could not match. They used mountains and canyons as cover. They struck from below, from behind, from angles the aliens never expected. They treated their aircraft like weapons they were willing to sacrifice because they were. In the Pacific Ocean, submarine commander Neil Rodriguez hunted alien supply ships with patient determination. His submarine was 50 years old. Using sonar technology the Vrexians could have detected easily if they had been looking for it. But they were not. They had never fought an enemy that used underwater vessels. Target acquired, his sonar operator whispered. Vrexian supply ship bearing 270, range 3,000 meters. Load tubes 1 and 2, Neil ordered quietly. Set depth for 10 meters. We only get one shot at this. The torpedoes were ancient technology, simple explosives with basic guidance systems. But they worked. 2 impacts below the waterline. The Vrexian ship, designed for space and hastily adapted for water, broke apart in minutes. It sank with all hands and enough supplies to support 5,000 troops for a month. Take us deep, Neil said. Silent running. Let's find the next one. On land, the guerrilla war intensified. In the forests of Germany, Special Forces leader Kurt Fischer led a team of 20 soldiers in a campaign of pure terror against the Vrexian occupiers. They sleep at night, Kurt explained to his team as they prepared for their raid. Their species evolved on a world with 2 suns. They never experienced true darkness. They have night vision equipment, but they don't have our instincts for it. His team moved through the forest in complete silence. They had trained for night operations their entire careers. They knew how to move without sound, how to kill without noise, how to vanish like smoke. The Vrexian camp had 200 soldiers and was supposedly secure. Guard towers with thermal scanners, patrols with motion detectors. It should have been impossible to infiltrate. Corporal Nina Schmidt moved like a shadow. She was small, barely 5.5 feet tall, and the Vrexians would have dismissed her as harmless if they could see her. She killed the first sentry with a knife. Moving so quickly, the alien never had time to raise an alarm. The body fell silently. One by one, Kurt's team took out the sentries. Then they planted explosives on the ammunition depot. 12 minutes after entering the camp, they were gone. The explosion lit up the night sky. It killed 43 Vrexian soldiers and destroyed supplies worth millions. By the time reinforcements arrived, Kurt's team was 15 kilometers away, already planning their next attack. These kinds of raids happened every night, in every occupied zone. The Vrexians would secure an area during the day, only to be attacked at night. They would send patrols to hunt resistance fighters, only to have the patrols ambushed and annihilated. They would establish supply lines, only to watch them get cut by sabotage. Commander Zixathara reviewed the casualty reports with growing horror. In 3 weeks, they had lost 30% of their forces. 30%, against a species that should have surrendered on day one. How is this possible? He demanded of his staff. They are divided into hundreds of nations. They have no unified command. How are they coordinating so effectively? His intelligence officer had no good answer. They seem to be using their primitive communications networks, radio, internet. They broadcast instructions openly, but in codes we cannot break quickly enough to be useful, then jam their communications. We tried, Commander. They switch frequencies constantly. They use old technology we did not think to prepare for, and when electronics fail, they use messengers, humans on foot or on primitive vehicles. Zixthera wanted to roar in frustration. These creatures were supposed to be emotional and irrational. Instead, they were the most coldly practical enemy he had ever faced. They used whatever worked, discarding pride and doctrine in favor of results. In orbit, the Vrexian fleet faced its own problems. Captain Helen Price, working from a bunker in Colorado, coordinated a different kind of warfare. Deploy Package 7, she ordered. All satellites in grid reference Alpha 7. Around the planet, hundreds of small satellites activated. They had been launched over the past 10 years, supposedly for weather monitoring and communications. In reality, they were weapons platforms. Simple ones, but effective. Each satellite released a package of ball bearings and metal fragments into carefully calculated orbits. At orbital velocities, even a small piece of metal hit with enormous force. The Vrexian fleet lost 17 ships in the first hour. Not from missiles or beam weapons, but from clouds of debris that shredded hulls and punctured fuel tanks. Thousands of soldiers died before they ever reached Earth's surface. They are withdrawing to higher orbits, Helen's tactical officer reported, establishing a perimeter outside our debris field. Good, Helen replied with grim satisfaction. That forces them to use more fuel for every landing, and it gives our anti-aircraft systems more time to target them on the way down. The war was not going according to any plan the Vrexians understood. They had expected a conventional conflict. Armies meeting armies, technology against technology. Instead, they faced an enemy that refused to fight fair. Humans used hospitals as command centers, knowing the Vrexians would hesitate to bomb medical facilities. They used schools as armories, betting that alien intelligence would not expect it. They hid weapons in ruins and soldiers in crowds. They turned every building, every vehicle, every piece of terrain into a potential threat. And they learned. Every Vrexian tactic once seen was countered within days. The aliens tried using drones for reconnaissance. Humans shot them down or hacked them. The aliens tried cutting power to cities. Humans had backup generators and fought just as well in darkness. The aliens tried separating military from civilians. Humans made every civilian a potential fighter. This is not warfare, Zixthara's second officer said after another disastrous engagement. This is chaos. No, Zixthara replied quietly. This is what they have been doing to each other for thousands of years. We are simply the newest enemy, and they are very, very good at this. For the first time in his career, Commander Zixathara considered the possibility that the invasion might fail, that these soft, emotional, seemingly weak creatures might actually defeat the Vrexian Confederacy. 6 weeks into the invasion, the Vrexian High Command made a decision that would change the war forever. Commander Zixathara received the order with something close to relief. If conventional warfare had failed, they would try something else. Authorization granted for biological warfare, the message stated. Target the human population directly. Eliminate them, then colonize the empty world. Zixthara gathered his senior staff. We will deploy the plague weapon. It is designed to target human genetic codes specifically. 99% fatality rate within 30 days. The planet will be ours without firing another shot. His officers showed approval. This was warfare as they understood it. Clean, efficient, final. The bioweapon was released over 30 major cities simultaneously, invisible, odorless, deadly. It would spread through the air, through water, through contact. Within a week it would be global. Within a month, humanity would be extinct. In her command bunker, Lisa Matthews received the first reports of the plague with a coldness that made her staff step back. Her face showed no emotion. Her voice was steady. But everyone who worked with her knew that look. Confirmed? She asked. Yes, ma'am, the medical officer replied. It is a targeted bioweapon. Mortality rate is climbing fast. Current estimates suggest 30 to 40% of the global population will die. Not 99%? No, ma'am. Human immune systems are more diverse than they calculated. We are adapting faster than their models predicted, but the casualties will still be catastrophic. Lisa was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to General Peter Kane. They tried to exterminate us. They have crossed a line they should not have crossed. Agreed, Kane said quietly. What are your orders? Activate Protocol Omega, everything. Every weapon we have been holding back. Every tactic we considered too brutal. They wanted total war. Let us show them what that means when humans stop being polite. The message went out on all channels to every military unit, every resistance cell, every soldier still fighting. The rules of engagement were canceled. There would be no prisoners, no mercy, no limits. Colonel Eric Stone received the authorization in his command post in North America. He was a hard man, made harder by 6 weeks of brutal warfare. He read the orders twice to make sure he understood them correctly. No restrictions, he said to his assembled officers. We use everything. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, psychological warfare, whatever it takes. In Toronto, biochemical specialist Dr. Kate Morrison had been waiting for this order. Her laboratory had been working on a response to potential alien bioweapons for 15 years. Now she would deploy it. The virus is ready, she told her assistant Ryan Cooper. It targets their respiratory system. It spreads through their air recycling systems. Mortality rate is approximately 20%, but it will make another 40% too sick to fight. Is this right? Ryan asked quietly. Using biological weapons? Kate looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death in the past weeks. They tried to exterminate us first. This is not about right or wrong. This is about survival. Release it. The human bioweapon spread through Vrexian bases like wildfire. It was not as sophisticated as theirs. It was cruder, faster, more brutal, but it worked. Within 72 hours, every Vrexian soldier on Earth was infected. Within a week, 20% were dead. The rest were weakened, sick, their combat effectiveness cut in half. But the biological warfare was just the beginning. Humans had been preparing other surprises. In the Pacific Ocean, Submarine Commander Neil Rodriguez received new orders. His target was not a supply ship this time. It was a Vrexian underwater base established to support their naval operations. How many soldiers? He asked his intelligence officer. Approximately 5,000, Captain, plus their command staff for this entire region. Neil looked at the weapon they had loaded into his torpedo tubes. It was a small nuclear device, low yield by military standards, just 5 kilotons, but in the confined waters around the base it would be enough. I need confirmation on this order, Neil said carefully. We are talking about using a nuclear weapon. Confirmed, Captain. Authorization code Omega 77. They used biological weapons on our cities. We respond in kind. Neil took a deep breath. Then he gave the order. Arm the weapon. Set depth for 200 meters. Fire when ready. The nuclear torpedo traveled 3 kilometers before detonating. The underwater explosion was not as dramatic as a surface burst, but it was just as deadly. The pressure wave crushed the Vrexian base like a tin can. 5,000 alien soldiers died in seconds. The shock wave was detected as far away as Australia. It was the first nuclear weapon used in the war. It would not be the last. In Nevada, Air Force Command authorized the use of their most desperate tactic. Captain Steve Harrison received his orders with grim understanding. We are converting 3 cargo ships into kinetic weapons, his briefing officer explained. We load them with nuclear warheads, aim them at the Vrexian fleet, and detonate them on impact. Suicide ships gone, Steve said. Remote controlled. You will pilot them from here. But yes, essentially suicide ships. We throw everything we have at their fleet and hope we take enough of them with us. Steve had been a pilot for 12 years. He had never imagined he would end his career piloting a ship loaded with bombs into an enemy fleet. But these were not normal times. When do we launch? He asked. 6 hours. Get some rest, Captain. You are going to need it. The 3 ships launched from hidden facilities around the globe. They were not warships. They were converted cargo vessels. loaded with every nuclear weapon humanity could spare. Each one was remotely piloted by a human crew on the ground. The Vrexian fleet detected them immediately. "Unknown vessels approaching," the sensor operator reported to Commander Zixathera. "They are on collision course, hail them. Demand identification," but the ships did not respond. They simply accelerated, burning their engines at maximum thrust, heading straight for the heart of the Vrexian fleet. "Destroy them," Zixathera ordered. His ships opened fire. Particle beams and missiles tore into the approaching vessels. One exploded before reaching the fleet. But the other two kept coming, damaged but still functional. Captain Steve Harrison watched his screens as his ship absorbed hit after hit. Systems failed. Hull breaches appeared, but the engines still worked. And that was all that mattered. "Impact in 30 seconds, he reported calmly. "All warheads armed. The Vrexian flagship tried to evade, but capital ships are not agile." Steve's vessel slammed into its engine section at tremendous speed. Then every nuclear weapon on board detonated simultaneously. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface. A miniature sun bloomed in orbit, vaporizing the flagship and 3 nearby cruisers. The second suicide ship hit a troop carrier, killing 15,000 soldiers in an instant. In one devastating attack, humanity had destroyed a quarter of the Vrexian orbital fleet. Commander Zixathera, aboard a patrol ship when the attack occurred, watched his command structure burn. He felt something he had never experienced in 3 decades of military service. He felt fear. "What kind of species does this?" his tactical officer whispered. "What kind of creature turns their own ships into bombs?" Zixathera had no answer. The humans were not fighting like any enemy he had studied. They were not trying to minimize casualties or preserve resources. They were throwing everything they had, including their own lives, into the war effort. On the ground, the war intensified even further. Human forces, no longer constrained by rules of engagement, attacked with savage efficiency. In Berlin, Kurt Fischer's Special Forces team stopped taking prisoners. Every Vrexian patrol they ambushed was annihilated. Every supply convoy was destroyed. They used chemical weapons, improvised explosives, and tactics that would have been considered war crimes in human conflicts. "They tried to exterminate us," Kurt told his soldiers. "Remember that. Remember the cities they bombed. Remember the plague they released. Show them what happens when you try to genocide humanity." In Tokyo, resistance fighters lured a Vrexian battalion into the subway system, then flooded it with poison gas. 800 aliens died in the tunnels, choking on their own blood. In Cairo, soldiers used suicide vests to destroy Vrexian command posts. They would approach pretending to surrender, then detonate themselves and everyone nearby. In Sydney, snipers targeted alien medical facilities, killing wounded soldiers and doctors alike. It was brutal. It was vicious. It was everything the Vrexians thought humans were not capable of being. And it was working. The casualty rates climbed on both sides. Humanity lost nearly 2 billion people to the plague and the warfare. But the Vrexians were losing entire divisions. Their occupation was collapsing. Their fleet was crippled. Commander Zixathera sat alone in his quarters reviewing the tactical situation. They had started with 300,000 troops. They now had less than 100,000 combat-effective soldiers. The humans had been reduced from 8 billion to 6 billion, but those 6 billion were still fighting. He pulled up the psychological profile of humanity that intelligence had provided before the invasion. It spoke of emotional weakness, of compassion, of a species that valued individual life above collective goals. The profile was completely wrong. Yes, humans were emotional. But those emotions made them unpredictable and creative. The Vrexian High Command deliberated for 3 days before responding to Commander Zixathera's request for withdrawal. 3 days during which another 5,000 Vrexian soldiers died on Earth. 3 days during which the human resistance grew bolder and more vicious. The response, when it came, was brief. Withdrawal approved. Evacuate all remaining forces. The planet Earth is hereby designated as forbidden territory. Any future contact with the human species is prohibited. Zixathera read the message twice. They were giving up. The Vrexian Confederacy, undefeated for 300 years, was retreating from a primitive world. He should have felt shame. Instead, he felt only relief. Begin evacuation procedures, he ordered his staff. All ground forces to extraction points. We leave within 48 hours. But the humans were not going to make it easy. Lisa Matthews received the intelligence report about the Vrexian withdrawal with cold satisfaction. "They are pulling out," General Peter Kane said. "We won." "Not yet," Lisa replied. "They tried to exterminate us. They do not get to just leave. We make them pay for every meter of ground they retreat from." The orders went out to all resistance cells. "Attack the evacuation. Make them bleed for every ship that leaves. Show them the cost of invading Earth." In New York, Lieutenant Jake Patterson gathered his surviving Marines. They were exhausted, half-starved, running low on ammunition. But they were still alive, still fighting. "The aliens are evacuating from Central Park," he told them. "Same place they landed 2 months ago. They have 6 transport ships coming down to pick up their troops. We are going to hit them during the extraction." "Sir," one of his sergeants said carefully, "we have maybe 100 combat-effective soldiers left. They will have thousands at that extraction point." "Then we make those 100 count," Jake replied. "We have been fighting smart for 2 months. One more mission. Make it hurt." His Marines moved into position around Central Park. They had explosives, sniper rifles, anti-tank weapons, and most importantly, the knowledge of every hiding spot in the area. The Vrexian transports landed heavily, their engines scorching the grass. Soldiers began boarding in organized columns. They were professionals, maintaining discipline even in retreat. Then Jake gave the signal. Snipers opened fire from 6 different buildings. Not at random soldiers, but at officers and pilots. The confusion was immediate. A transport pilot slumped over his controls. An officer coordinating the evacuation fell with a hole through his helmet. Then the explosives detonated. The charges were placed around the park perimeter, shaped to drive shrapnel inward. Hundreds of Vrexian soldiers were cut down in the first seconds. The aliens responded with overwhelming firepower, but the humans were already gone. They had fired, detonated, and retreated. By the time the Vrexians organized a counterattack, Jake's Marines were 3 blocks away planning their next strike. The same pattern repeated at evacuation points around the world. Humans attacked, inflicted casualties, and vanished. They made the Vrexians fight for every transport that left. The aliens had planned a 48-hour evacuation. It took 6 days and cost them another 8,000 soldiers. But eventually, the last Vrexian ship lifted from Earth's surface. The invasion was over. In his quarters aboard the last troop transport, Commander Zix Thara composed his final report. He was under no illusions about his fate. The High Command would demand answers. They would probably execute him for the failure. But he had one final duty. He had to tell them the truth about humanity. "Final report on the Earth campaign," he began typing. "The human species represents an unprecedented threat to the Confederacy. Initial assessments were catastrophically incorrect. We assumed their emotional nature indicated weakness. This was wrong. Their emotions drive creativity, unpredictability, and fierce determination. We assumed their physical weakness made them easy prey. This was wrong. They compensate through superior tactics, adaptability, and willingness to sacrifice. We assumed their compassion indicated a soft species. This was wrong. Their compassion exists alongside a capacity for violence that exceeds any species we have encountered." He paused, thinking about everything he had witnessed. The ambushes, the suicide attacks, the biological warfare, the nuclear weapons. "Humans evolved on a death world," he continued. "They survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and most significantly themselves. They have fought continuous wars for their entire history. They have developed thousands of ways to kill. Warfare is not something they do. It is something they are." He added more details. The tactics they had used. The weapons. The psychological warfare. He wanted the High Command to understand exactly what had gone wrong. They are not prey. They are not even predators in the traditional sense. They are survivors who view extinction as preferable to submission. They will sacrifice anything, use any weapon, embrace any tactic if it means victory. Do not invade humanity. You will lose. And if you are very unlucky, you will survive to understand why. Zix Thara sent the report and waited for his fate. On Earth, the cleanup began. 2 billion people dead, dozens of cities in ruins. The environmental damage was catastrophic. But humanity had survived. Lisa Matthews stood in what had been her command bunker, now being converted back into a civilian facility. Around her, tired soldiers and administrators began the enormous task of rebuilding. "We won," General Kane said, standing beside her. "Against all odds, we actually won. We survived, Lisa corrected. That is not the same thing, and we need to make sure it never happens again. She activated a holographic display of the local stellar neighborhood. It showed dozens of star systems within 100 light-years. There are other species out there, 43 that we know of. Some of them allied with the Vrexians. Some stayed neutral. None helped us. What are you proposing? Kane asked, though he suspected he already knew. We need to advance, fast. We were vulnerable because we were stuck on one planet with primitive technology. We need to become an interstellar power, not to conquer, but to ensure no one ever thinks we are easy prey again. The proposal went to what remained of Earth's governments. The vote was nearly unanimous. Humanity would go to the stars, but first they sent a message. It was broadcast on all frequencies, using the captured Vrexian communications technology. It went to every known species in the local sector. To all civilizations within reception range, the message began. This is Earth. The Vrexian Confederacy invaded our world 3 months ago. They attempted to exterminate our species using biological weapons. They failed. We defeated them using tactics and weapons they could not counter. Their surviving forces have retreated. Earth is now considered forbidden territory by the Confederacy. The message included footage, Vrexian ships burning, alien soldiers retreating, human forces fighting with savage efficiency. It was a warning and a promise. We do not seek conflict, the message continued, but we will defend ourselves with absolute determination. We look small. We look weak. We appear emotional and irrational. Do not make the mistake of thinking that makes us prey. The Vrexians learned this lesson at great cost. We suggest you learn from their example. The message was received across dozens of worlds. The reaction varied. Some species dismissed it as propaganda. Others studied it carefully. A few began reassessing their intelligence on humanity. In the Vrexian Confederacy, the High Command read Zixthara's final report. They executed him as expected, but they also classified his report as required reading for all military officers. The Earth campaign became a case study in catastrophic intelligence failure. One passage in particular was highlighted and repeated in every military academy. They look cute. They keep pets and cry at fictional stories. They show excessive care for their young. These traits led us to believe they were soft. We were wrong. These traits exist alongside a warrior psychology, forged over millions of years of survival on a death world. Do not be deceived by their appearance. Do not mistake compassion for weakness. The humans will smile at you, play with their small animals and speak of peace, and if you threaten them, they will kill you with methods you never imagined possible. On Earth, reconstruction continued. The dead were mourned. The wounded were healed. And quietly, in hidden facilities, humanity began building weapons and ships far more advanced than anything they had possessed before the invasion. Colonel Eric Stone visited one such facility in Colorado. Engineers were working on a new class of warship, using captured alien technology combined with human innovation. How long until we can build a fleet? He asked the project manager, an engineer named Paul Bennett. 5 years for a functional fleet, 10 for a proper armada. We are reverse engineering everything the Vrexians left behind. Their ships, their weapons, their technology. Good, Eric replied. We need to be ready. They came once. Someone else might come again. Do you think they will? Paul asked. Eric looked at the designs on the holographic display. Ships that could travel between stars. Weapons that could crack planets. Humanity reaching beyond their small world. I think they would be stupid to try, he said finally. But we are not going to rely on them being smart. We are going to make sure that next time, we win even faster. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity could do when they stopped being defensive and started being proactive. The cute, emotional. 5 years after the invasion, Earth looked very different. The scars of war were still visible, but humanity had rebuilt with a determination that impressed even themselves. More importantly, they had not rebuilt the same world. They had built something new. Lisa Matthews stood in the orbital command center looking down at the planet below. The facility had not existed before the war. Now it housed 3,000 personnel and served as the headquarters for the Terran Defense Force. Status report, she said to her staff. She was older now, gray showing in her hair, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. The colony's ship is ready for departure, Admiral Helen Price reported. Helen had been promoted twice since the war, now commanding Earth's growing space fleet. 3,000 colonists plus military escort. Destination is Proxima Centauri. And the fleet. 12 warships completed and operational. Another 20 in construction. We are ahead of schedule. Lisa nodded with satisfaction. Humanity was no longer trapped on one vulnerable world. They were expanding, spreading throughout the local stellar neighborhood. And they were doing it with a military escort that would have made the Vrexians think twice. The colony ship was named Defiance. It was a statement and a promise. Captain Jennifer Walsh commanded the vessel from a bridge that combined human innovation with captured alien technology. She was 42 years old and had fought in the war as a fighter pilot. Now she would lead humanity's first colony beyond Earth. All systems green, her chief engineer reported. Ready for departure on your order, Captain. Jennifer looked at her crew. They were volunteers, every one of them. They knew the risks. They knew they might be traveling to their deaths. But they also knew they were making history. Take us out, she ordered. Let's show the galaxy what humans can do. The Defiance departed Earth orbit to the cheers of millions watching from the surface. It was not just a colony ship. It was a symbol. Humanity reaching for the stars, no longer content to wait for others to find them. The journey to Proxima Centauri would take 6 months, even with the improved engines they had developed. 6 months during which Jennifer and her crew would be alone in the void, hoping their technology held, hoping they had prepared for every contingency. On Earth, the diplomatic efforts were equally important. Lisa had established contact with 6 other species in the local sector. Not the Vrexians, they had refused all communication, but other civilizations, smaller ones who had also suffered under the Confederacy's expansion. The first formal treaty was signed with the Keltharians, a species from a world 30 light-years away. They were traders and explorers, not warriors, but they had technology humanity needed, and humanity had something they wanted: protection. We remember what the Confederacy did to your people, the Keltharian ambassador said during the signing ceremony. We remember how you fought back. We would like that same spirit defending our trading routes. The Terran Federation was born from that treaty. Not an empire built on conquest, but an alliance built on mutual defense. Other species joined quickly. The Xandorians, who had lost a colony to Vrexian expansion. The Polthians, whose homeworld had been threatened before the war. The Remnites, refugees from a species nearly destroyed by the Confederacy. Within 3 years, the Terran Federation had 11 member species. Humanity was no longer alone, but not everyone was happy about humanity's rise. In the Vrexian Confederacy, now much reduced in power and territory, there were those who wanted revenge. Supreme Leader Corthan stood before the military council, arguing for a second invasion. They are weak, he insisted. They won through luck and primitive tactics. A proper military campaign with overwhelming force would crush them. General Vexmore, one of the few survivors of the first invasion, stood up. No, he said flatly. I was there. I saw what they did. I watched them turn buildings into bombs and civilians into soldiers. I watched them sacrifice their own ships to destroy ours. I watched them use biological weapons they had no right to possess. They are not weak. They are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. But they are primitive, Corthan insisted. They were primitive, Vexmore corrected. Now they have our technology. They have our weapons. And they have allies. The Terran Federation controls 15 star systems now. They have a fleet of 40 warships. And most importantly, they remember what we tried to do to them. If we attack again, they will not just defend. They will come for us. And this time, we will not survive the experience. The Council voted against the second invasion. The Vrexians would avoid humanity. It was the smart choice. 20 years after the invasion, humanity had 17 colonies and a fleet of 200 warships. The Terran Federation had grown to include 23 species. They were becoming a major power in the local sector. In the military academy on Mars, new officers studied the war extensively. Professor Jake Patterson, formerly Lieutenant Patterson of the Marine Corps, taught tactics to eager students. The Vrexians made 3 critical mistakes, he told his class. First, they assumed physical weakness meant military weakness. Second, they thought our emotions made us irrational. Third, they believed their technological superiority guaranteed victory. All 3 assumptions were wrong. But Professor, a young cadet asked, were we not lucky? If they had committed their full fleet from the beginning, could we have won? Jake smiled grimly. Maybe not, but we would have made them pay for every meter of ground. We would have fought until there was nothing left to fight with. That is the lesson the galaxy learned. Not that humanity is unbeatable, but that invading us costs more than anyone is willing to pay. The cadets took notes. They were training to protect humanity's growing empire, to ensure that no one ever threatened Earth again. In a museum in New York, rebuilt from the ruins of the war, visitors walked through exhibits showing the invasion. There were Vrexian weapons on display, footage of battles, memorials to the dead, and in the center a simple plaque with a message. 2 billion humans died in the war. We remember them. We honor them, and we promise that their sacrifice was not in vain. Never again will humanity be prey. Never again will we wait for others to decide our fate. We are the guardians of our own destiny. On Proxima Centauri, now called New Earth, Captain Jennifer Walsh walked through a thriving colony. 20,000 humans lived there now, building cities, farming alien soil, raising children who had never seen Earth. It was working. Humanity was spreading. Do you ever wonder if we will face another invasion? Her second officer, Commander Paul Morris, asked her one evening. Jennifer looked up at the unfamiliar stars. Maybe, probably, but next time we will be ready. And next time, they will think twice before they see our smiling faces and think we are weak. In the Rexian capital, the military archive held Commander Zix Thara's final report under maximum security. Young officers read it as required study, learning about the species that had defeated them. The final paragraph was quoted in every classroom. Humanity looks cute. They appear emotional. They seem weak. This is the greatest deception in the galaxy. Underneath that exterior is a warrior species that has survived everything their death world could throw at them. They have fought each other for millions of years and learned every lesson war can teach. They will smile at you, offer friendship, speak of peace. But if you threaten them, if you attack their homes, if you try to exterminate them, they will show you a fury that burns hotter than any star. The invasion of Earth was our greatest mistake. Do not repeat it. 50 years after the invasion, an archaeological team discovered something on a distant world. It was a ruin from an ancient civilization, long dead. Among the artifacts, they found a warning carved in stone. Beware the small ones who laugh and play. Beware the ones who show kindness to the weak, for when threatened, they become death itself. We learned this too late. Learn from our mistake. The human archaeologist who translated it sent the finding to Earth. Researchers debated what ancient species had written the warning. But the message was clear. Humanity was not the first species to look harmless and prove deadly. They were just the latest. And across the galaxy in 1,000 languages on 100 worlds, a new phrase entered common use. When someone underestimated an opponent, when someone dismissed a threat because of appearances, they were warned. Do not make the human mistake. Lisa Matthews, now in her 70s and retired from active service, sat in her home looking at old photos, pictures of the command staff from the war. So many were gone now, dead in battle or from age. But they had won. They had saved humanity. Her granddaughter, a young officer in the Terran fleet, visited that evening. "Grandmother," she asked, "when you fought the Brexians, were you scared?" Lisa thought about the question carefully. "Every day," she admitted. But fear is not the same as weakness. Fear keeps you alert. It makes you careful. We were terrified, and we used that terror to sharpen our tactics, to motivate our soldiers, to drive our innovation. And if they came back, Lisa smiled, and there was steel in that smile. Then we would remind them why they left in the first place. We would show them that the cute, emotional humans they dismissed have become something they cannot defeat. The granddaughter left for her posting on the frontier, defending the growing Terran Federation. Lisa watched her go and felt pride.